Welcome back to the Introduction to Delphi mini-series. This is part 2 of 10. In the previous video, we discussed the main screen. Now we're going to add our first client. Before we add a client, I'd like you to go to the Setup menu and select Default Client. I'm going to resize this just a little bit so you can see what I'm looking at here. But this screen is designed to set up the default client to try to save you hours down the road when inputting people. If you happen to be doing all of your work in a particular state, which most people are, we happen to be in Oregon, so we can default the state to Oregon. We also might generally perform individual psych, which is 90806. The provider of service, if there's one provider in the practice, we can select who that default provider is. If you have multiple providers within your practice, then we may not want to populate that. The place of service in this example is going to be office. That's where the place of service typically, or sessions typically occur. The other thing about this screen is that the items in red, like first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, etc., are the items that are required. These are the items that we are telling you must be entered into the program in order for you to get paid. However, reasonable people can argue with us about this one. And also, Delphi does provide free electronic billing in most cases. And if you're going to do electronic billing, you probably don't want to put the referring physician on the claim form. Otherwise, you have to hunt down their national provider ID. So if you would not like to be bothered with the referring physician, we can simply click on the red box, referring physician. It says referring physician is now optional for all clients. We'll go ahead and just turn it back on. But for example, if you're doing Medicare work, the facility may be required, and you want to make sure that you don't ever forget that. So we click on facility. Facility is now required for all clients. And I'll just turn that back off. So the other important thing on this screen is the area code. If your area code tends to be a particular area code, here in Oregon, it's 503 for the Portland metropolitan area. There are other area codes in other parts of the state, but we're going to default our area codes to 503, so you don't have to type that each time. Now I'm going to close this default client screen, and the main point of this video is to show you how to add a new client. So I'm going to click on Add New Patient, and from that we can do several things. Copy from an existing client, but in this video we're going to add a new client, and this is the client information screen. So I'm going to add a client, Hank, last name Aaron. The reason I picked Aaron is because it begins with 2 A's, and that will appear at the top of our client list. An address, city, state is already populated from our default client, zip code, gender, in this case male, birth date. There's a lot of ways to enter a birth date, but we'll just do 05 08 1963. The referral source, you can define these in the setup menu. We'll just say newspaper. The procedure code for this client. This is the procedure code that occurs most often. Obviously, the very first time you record a session, we'll be doing that in the next video, but the first time you record a session, the first session will probably be a 90801 interview evaluation. 90806 is the procedure code that occurs most often for this particular client, Hank Aaron. The provider is already filled out, which we did in the setup under default client, and the place of service is almost always office in this example. Diagnosis, you can click the drop down and see a list of diagnostic codes. I'll just go with a generalized anxiety disorder. And the referring physician. In this case, I'll just pick John Jacobson. That's really it for setting up a client. And the first thing I want to show you is if you close this screen, we now have Hank Aaron in the system, And the important thing about this is over on the right, we can now access all of the other features of the program: recording sessions, applying payments, session histories and insurance billing, etc. However, if we click on Freud, or let's try somebody else. Here we go. Roger Green. You'll notice that there are warnings over here on the right-hand side. The items below need to be completed before you are allowed to use the billing features of the software. It says select patient information. And it's telling you exactly what is wrong with this particular person's account. Basically, we're not going to let you record sessions for this person unless you fix this information. So in order to resolve this, I'm going to click on patient information, which it tells you to do right here. And in red, visually, here's everything that's wrong with his account. And if I was to put the address in, and begin to take care of a few other ones, the red begins to go away. And if I close this screen, I'll see a few less warnings, but obviously the gender, birth date, and we can go back to patient information to see what's wrong. Another cool thing about this is you can move these screens around, but if we leave this screen open and we go back and click on Hank, you'll see that these screens sync together. So we don't have to open and close screens all day long, and we can position this anywhere on your monitor. Let's go back to Hank for a second. Another thing about adding a client that will happen in most cases is that you'll see this green box, does the client have insurance? I'm going to check this box, which gives us a new tab up at the top called insurance coverage. If I click on that tab, I have the option to add coverage, delete coverage. We're going to click add coverage. Here's a list of various insurance companies which can be added to the program from the setup menu. I'm going to click Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. And Delphi would like to know a little bit about this particular insurance company. Is it the primary carrier? That's already checked in this case. The claim form type would be CMS paper. Remember, Delphi provides free electronic billing in almost all cases. And if that was the case, you would pick CMS electronic. By the way, the HCFA paper and the HCFA electronic are really not used anymore. Now, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mass, we also have this middle section where some of the nooks and crannies on the claim form, such as insured's ID, policy group number, prior authorization, relationship of the patient to the carrier of the policy. So Hank might actually be insured under his wife's policy, and that person could potentially be at a different address. One other very powerful feature of this screen is calculate the copayment. If we believe we know what the copayment is, and as you are probably aware, copays are subject to a lot of forces outside of your control, and what we're doing right now is our best guesstimate as to what we believe this person's copay to be for each session. I'm going to put in $20 here. You could do this as a percentage. Maybe the client has a 20% copay, but today we're just going to say it's a flat fee of $20. We're not going to do the automatic write-off today. I'll show you that in a more advanced video. But that's pretty much it for setting up the client's insurance coverage. Now, if we close this screen, we are now ready to use the program for Hank Aaron. The next video in this 10-part series will deal with recording sessions.